Greetings and welcome to Prime Radio. I'm Jonathan Pritchett, and my lackey today is...
Braxton Hunter.
Yes, and I am taking over, apparently, or something like that. And Alex, if you're watching, see, you're not the only one who kind of bungles the intros. We do it as well. Jason Miles, we continue to be speechless. Your generosity is very... It's just incredible. We really appreciate you. I mean, it's just wow. You don't know what it means to us that you would support us the way that you do, because it really does help what we're trying to do and accomplish on this program. And you have been such a major part of what we're doing here and the upgrades that we have. And we have another huge upgrade about to happen, in a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks.
Are you referring to what I was just discussing with you? Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
And
it may involve Pritchett not sitting behind me anymore, although he wants to keep that.
Yeah. Everyone else has a problem with it, but apparently I'm going to be shifting around. We're having some major upgrades anyway. You're a big part of that, Jason. We so much appreciate your continued support for Trinity Radio, and we try to pour as much money as we can into making it better. Maybe I need to learn how to do some things so Braxton doesn't mess the intro up, but man,
everybody thought that was you.
Yeah.
Everybody thought that was you. Okay, let's jump into this. Here we are. I, by the way, do not have COVID, although I saw that David, now I've forgotten again, Beeler?
Derek
Beeler, yes.
Come on.
Has had the COVID virus. Well,
Don't you be coughing your COVID?
I have a cold, which it's a dangerous time to have a cold, because if you're in Bucks or wherever else and you cough a little bit, everybody gets freaked out.
Hey, in the elbow, dude.
Yeah, it's hard to show that on camera, I guess. Okay.
Yeah. No, do it when you cough.
No, this is not a Hovind throat tickle. I don't know what that is, but it's not. Okay, now, what we're doing today, so typically on the show, what we do is we deal with, during the week usually, is we deal with something that is YouTube-based, that is from an atheist. Today what we're doing, thank you, MJ Jackson.
MJ Jackson.
Sometimes what we do on a Friday, thank you so much. What's up, good people? What's up, MJ? We actually focus on other atheist content that might be out there that's not necessarily on YouTube. One of the common people to do that with is Hemant Mehta, the Friendly Atheist. So we've done a lot on Friendly Atheist. He had like 78 things that Christians.
And I think, didn't we get MJ in on that? And
we got MJ in.
Adam Coleman got in on that. We had a great time obliterating all that stuff,
in multiple videos.
I think the Friendly Atheist thing is a little bit not always friendly, but that's all right.
Yeah. So in this particular one,
I'm not always friendly, so I ain't worried about it.
In this particular episode, what we're going to deal with is he had an article, but he didn't write it. Somebody else wrote it. Someone named Rebekah Kohlhepp wrote this article. So we're going to walk through this article now. For those that don't know, the Friday afternoon live stream is a staple here at Trinity Radio, and it is less focused, less professional. It's just us. It's just us horsing around.
I'm here. That's all you need to know about.
This is true. Well, I don't want to say it.
The channel goes strong until Friday, and then it's a train wreck because Pritchett.
That's not true. Some people prefer Friday more than anything else. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to go through this article. But really, the content that we advertise for the Friday live stream is typically something we do care about, but we want to get through it so that we can just get to Q&A with our audience. That's what we really want.
Adversary 7-9 hit the nail on the head. Right?
Well, that's what I just said. Oh, yeah. Well, I better not say that, but I'll put it up there anyway. Yeah. I feel like Hemant should rename himself the passive-aggressive.
Indeed.
Atheist. Or directly aggressive sometimes.
No, that's me.
Thank you, Gregory Fisher.
Wow.
Love what you guys do. The Friendly Theist. Amen.
Yeah.
Amen. And thank you so much, Jeremy Scott Despain. He says go buy some cough drops.
Please.
Jeremy Scott Despain has a YouTube channel, and Godless Engineer responded to him just the other day, and I contacted him and said, how about we do a response to that response? So we're going to do that. All right, so let's get into this article, Jonathan.
Yes.
The article is called Southern Baptist, ex-evangelicals ignore Christianity's intellectual tradition.
Stop, because she put Southern Baptist in the title and then mentions that this guy goes to, was it Southern or something?
Southeastern,
which
we haven't gotten to
yet.
yet.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't, because she's responding to that guy, but I don't know why she's pick on Southern Baptist. I used to be one.
Yeah, but you're saying you're noticing that she's taking what one guy says and making that span across all of Southern Baptist.
You know, I had most of my Christian intellectual development while I was a Southern Baptist for 25 years.
Yeah.
So
you're taking up for him a bit here.
Yeah, and because of that, I ended up no longer being a Southern Baptist or affirming certain points in the Baptist faith.
But they did expose you to an intellectual tradition.
Right, yeah. I mean,
so let's jump. Well, first of all, I want to say
maybe
this.
That's why they don't do that anymore, is to keep Southern Baptist because
for those of you that out there was a discussion last week about Kevin Max had come out as ex-evangelical, and so I had tweeted that I am extra-evangelical. But you folks came up with something better.
MJ came up with this one.
Hashtag BEvangelical.
That's MJ.
And so what we have done, and I wanted this to be in the merch bar that's below this video screen that you're looking at, but it's not there yet because I just created it today. But you can get this nice die-cut sticker, hashtag BEvangelical, and you can also get it instead on a T-shirt, or you can get it on a mask. So you can have hashtag BEvangelical.
Okay,
and so
some of the sales we need to up our patron giving to MJ then, because he needs to get a
and
he came up with it, and you didn't ask him, so
I completely forgot who came up with it. But thank you, MJ.
Yeah,
now here's the thing.
We'll increase our patron giving.
Here's the thing.
As long as you'll increase your videos, maybe that'll help.
If you will look at the description to this video, you will see a link to our Teespring shop, where you can get all of these things, because it's really hard to find Teespring shops for some reason. But there's a link right there in the description, so check that out. All right, so let's jump into this article. I hope you guys will at least start using the hashtag BEvangelical. All right, here we go. This is a guest post written by Rebekah Kohlhepp, who regularly blogs at She Seeks Nonfiction. Now, I actually checked out She Seeks Nonfiction, and we're going to talk a little bit about what I found there as we move forward pretty quickly. It says here, whenever you meet atheists, chances are, by the way, the link to this article is in the description if you want to follow along with me reading here. Open it in another tab. Chances are they'll have some religious deconversion story at the ready. Yes, that whenever you meet atheists, chances are they'll have some religious deconversion story at the ready. Okay, first thing I want to say about this is not her fault. I'm not blaming her with this or him at Meta necessarily, but I've been told many times, because like in my 10 questions video, some of the questions presumed people who had been some kind of religious or specifically Christian and had deconverted. Like she says here, when you meet atheists, they have a deconversion story at the ready. When I speak that way, even if I say what she said here, chances are they'll have a religious deconversion. People will jump on me and say, no, there are many atheists who were not raised in Christian households. And I only bring this up because this happened to me a lot when I was in the theological debate arena with Calvinists versus non-Calvinists. And this is true of other groups, is you'll try to describe something accurately, or you'll try to say that, and they'll correct you, and they'll no, that's not how that is. You know, some of us were always Calvinists, right? For example. But it happens here too. All right, let's move on. Many of us who had religious upbringings abandoned them after a dose of critical thinking, reading a book explaining the problems with organized religion, or recognizing religious hypocrisy. Now, I want you to notice, before you say what you want to say, Pritchett, she says many of us. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean she's a part of that us, but it certainly gives that impression. Many of us had religious upbringings. It sounds like she's putting herself in the group that had religious upbringings, but abandoned them after a dose of critical thinking and blah, blah, blah. Well, she did have a religious upbringing, but it's also true that on the about section of her own website, her blog, she says, quote, I was raised in the conservative Lutheran Church, Missouri Synod. So she did have an upbringing, right? A Christian upbringing, I guess, according to this. And even though I never really believed in God, I was so accustomed to being surrounded by Christians that I attended Grove City College. And then she says some other things. So I want you to notice, this is not someone who has a deconversion story. She says many of us who had religious upbringings abandoned them after those critical thinking. And growing up, went on a similar journey and all that. She did not. She says many of us will have deconversion stories. She doesn't have a deconversion story. She has a story of where she stopped being. And I'm not.
Well, she could mean many of us atheists.
She could mean that. So she's not. That's why I said she's not necessarily putting herself in that group, but it sure looks that way.
Yeah.
And then she mentions of herself in her about that she was in this, Missouri Synod Lutheran situation. But she says, "I never believed in God." To be a Christian is got to involve someone believing in God.
Right.
So you left your particular community of faith.
If you believe in Jesus and Christology, you believe.
But you didn't leave God, because you admit that you never were with God.
Right.
Not that you believe in a God, but you never even believed in God. In what sense is that a Christian? So you left your faith community. You didn't leave Christianity. You didn't leave. Yeah, you didn't deconvert, right? So I think that's kind of important. But let's get back to the article. Anything you want to say about that? There was something that jumped out. It was the reason she gave, so I'll read those again. Problems. She read a book. People read a book.
I read a book in my faith class. That's the one. Critical thinking. I'm sorry.
A book.
A book. Critical thinking. Of course, I learned critical thinking from Christianity. Right. Christianity is really big on critical thinking. I don't know if people are aware of that, but I mean, they've kind of developed most of what we think of as critical thinking throughout the centuries. If you've ever read books that are older than 10 years old. But so I that's not really the purview of anything to do with leaving Christianity. Reading a book explaining the problems with organized religion. We actually read those books too. So are there problems with organized religion? Sure. Are there awesome things about organized religion? Yep, you bet.
Yes.
And then this recognizing religious hypocrisy, that goes back to there's hypocrites at Walmart, there's hypocrites, at McDonald's, there's hypocrites.
Yeah. You don't stop going to those places.
Yeah.
And if you did, there's also those at IKEA. There's those at other whatever.
Yeah, and
places.
I recognize atheist hypocrisy.
Yes.
Yeah.
But what I want, one thing I always say, I haven't said it in a while.
And those Hindus
that I want to say here,
too. I don't want to leave them out.
Very clearly is, if you see this, Rebekah, I hope you understand. I'm not saying anything about you as an individual. I'm challenging the content of what you're saying, the words you've written. But you seem like a wonderful person, as best I can tell. This is not personal. I'm just responding to the issues, hopefully like you were too. But I do find that odd. Okay, so we've got that. Let's move on to, and by the way, the progressive Christianity that's going to come up in this, as we said last week, is supposed to be a rejection of organized religion in part, but an embrace of Jesus, when the very system that told you Jesus was coming, offered prophecies about the coming Messiah, was a very organized religious system.
Yeah,
just want to say. All right, so she says, instead, they ended up with a new, freer form. What does she say? She's talking about, but there's a different and growing group of people who went on a similar journey but didn't leave religion at all. Instead, they ended up with a new, freer form of faith. But Jordan, I'm sorry, and I don't know anything about Jordan, but doesn't seem to think that's a possibility, she says. Stefaniak, a graduate of Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary, that is a Southern Baptist seminary, says that he nearly deconstructed when he realized the evangelical world at large appeared to be completely void of intellectual substance.
See, okay, this has been a popular call since Mark Knoll's book, and what was that, in the 90s? The Scandal of the Evangelical Mind. I think that's still overstatement. I mean, you've been to a lot of churches, I've been to a lot of churches. This idea that you walk into the typical Southern Baptist, and let's just talk about Southern Baptist churches.
Yeah, Southern Baptist guy.
I walked into many Southern Baptist churches, and what I didn't meet was a bunch of intellectual wimps. Are there a few? Yes. But they're at Walmart, and same thing. But this idea that evangelicalism, by and large, is just devoid of any sort of intellectual tradition, I think is overstatement.
Not only is it overstatement, Pritchett, but if this guy was just a guy who happened to be in a church somewhere, okay, maybe you weren't exposed to the intellectual bulwark.
No, I want to pick on apologists here.
But he went to Southeastern, and before you pick on apologists,
Yeah, I'm going to pick on apologists.
I don't believe, I don't know how, I mean, I guess it happened to him. I don't know how you go to Southeastern, honestly. I mean, I know we have a seminary too, but I'm just gonna take up for my Southern Baptist Southeastern brothers
Look at
and
me
sisters.
defending Southern Baptist.
Yeah, for real. You're not gonna. I don't know how you go to Southeastern and not get exposed to the intellectual history of evangelical thought.
No, are there intellectually stunted people in churches? Yeah, they're everywhere. And I want to pick on apologists here too, because apologists think that if people in their local church aren't interested in apologetics the way that you are, they're not intellectual enough, and that's also bogus. Look, I'm barely interested in apologetics for most of the hours I'm not at work. So, I mean, just because not everyone's into what you're into doesn't mean that they're not intellectual either. And that's a problem. And I hear too many apologists singing the same song that this graduate of, no offense, what was his name? Stefaniak or whatever. I'm sorry, but just because they're not into the same things that you're into doesn't mean that there's no intellectual stimuli anywhere in any of these Southern Baptist churches.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So, and if you're at Southeastern, I just think you're encountering it. But I guess he didn't. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah. No,
but
that's a throwaway line that's been overused since Noel's book. Noel sounded a serious alarm that we needed to, in the mid-'90s, hey, hang on a second. But it's not like it's gotten worse since then just because people aren't talking about cosmological arguments and watching William Lane Craig videos. Mm-hmm. Get over yourselves, apologists. Anyway.
A fair point, Jonathan. But I want you to see this. So, but with the help of an evangelical mentor, he examined his. I went to see in his article, doesn't tell who it was either. He examined his faith and ended up even stronger in it. And so can you. Now that "and so can you," I'm just trying to read into this, and as a writer, as a literary device user, it seems like that was put there like, and so can you, like sarcastic a little bit. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's your intention, Rebekah, but that's how I'm taking it. I don't think that's too much of a reach. Here's the thing. It's actually true. It's actually true that if you have a mentor, if you have the help of other people who examine your faith, you can have a stronger faith. That's actually true. I'm actually going to give you the data for that. If you will look up the article, the Journal of the Scientific Study of Religion article, The Doubting Process, a longitudinal study of the precipitants and consequences of religious doubts. The abstract, this is from Neil Krauss and Christopher G. Ellison. The abstract itself says, the data reveal that over time, people who encounter a more negative interaction with fellow congregants have more doubts about religion, whereas more spiritual support and greater involvement in prayer groups are associated with less religious doubt. The findings further indicate that people who encounter more negative interaction are more likely to suppress religious doubt, but more who attend Bible study groups are more likely to seek spiritual growth when faced with doubt. Finally, the results suggest that suppressing religious doubt is associated with less favorable health, whereas seeking spiritual growth does not have that effect. So here's what I want you to understand from this. Does not have significant effect. What I want you to understand from this is, if you have bad experiences at church with church people, and you try to stuff your doubt away, you're more likely to walk away than if you have a support group and a mentor, something like that, and you look into these things. That is important. So when she says, and so can you, yes, so can you. That's actually true. That's actually what the data shows.
Yes.
Okay. Now let's continue with this. Do you have anything else to say about that, Pritchett?
Oh, probably, but go on.
He says he was put off by the shallowness and superficiality of the church, what with the pop music, self-help talks, and overnight video game extravaganzas.
Wait, overnight video game extravaganzas? This is like the movie nights and pizza party thing?
Yeah.
Right? Hey, Brett, can we have movie nights and pizza parties at church?
For real?
I mean, our church never does this stuff, and we have one of those pop music type. Brett doesn't give self-help talks, but throwing those in, I mean, look at Braxton. Come on, we need some self-help talks in our church. You need to start watching some Furtick sermons or something, man. Those, I don't, look, I think it's actually because a lot of it is the how then shall we live stuff in the Bible. You know, everyone wants to talk about Romans 1 through 11, but then they like 12 through 16, no thanks, I don't want to talk about that anymore. The deep theology is over. And then, but those chapters are, here's how you should live, right? So trying to apply that to our modern context may sound a little bit like self-help, and that's okay. So as long as you cover Romans 1 through 11, it's okay to cover 12 through 15, and then don't skip the exceedingly long farewells in chapter 16 either. But that, I mean, come on. And by golly, I'm jealous of these. We go to a multi-site church, right? I mean, it's not the biggest one. It's not, what we got, like 3,000 members? I go to a multi-site church. I've never once had a pizza party there or a movie night. I'm not saying they've never done it, but it's not the worst idea either. And I don't think those are superficial, because how many apologists talk about movies? How many great discussions can you have from movies? You and Chris Date stay up all night playing that stupid video game. Apologists like that stuff. So, I don't know. Quit picking on pizza parties and video games.
A couple of thoughts from the Freed Thinker, which is Tyler Vela. Summary of that finding, in other words, the article. Christians have known for millennia. Things Christians have known for millennia. Yeah, but he also says, wait, church isn't about playing Xbox and 60-year-old men in skinny jeans talking about being missionary to excuse superficial theology? What? Yeah, well, here's what I want to say about this. Okay, look, you've already kind of said this, but what's wrong with the community of faith doing things in community, like having good music? Some talks that you could call self-help. That shouldn't be all you're getting, but like you say, Pritchard, that should be part of it. What I take from that is to uplift, to exhort, to build up in the faith. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, if Tyler knocked off 20 years from that, you're a 40-year-old guy who plays video games.
Yes.
And
likes that Coldplay style
and
music.
You're not anti-skinny jeans at all.
Right. And like I said, if you think that wearing skinny jeans is unbiblical or not manly or something like that, then may I refer you to the images you'll find on Google of knights from the Middle Ages when they aren't wearing their knight uniform and they're wearing tights and skirts.
Or Puritans, for that matter.
Yes. But what's wrong with video game? If that was all you had, but in this guy's context, that is not all that evangelical Christianity had to offer. It has the thought life. It has that stuff that we get in church youth groups.
Yeah, Southeastern is
it's like somebody walked into my house, and I've got this bookshelf with all these great, incredible books, heady books on them. But I'm also over here playing video games, and it's like, look, obviously Braxton's form of Christianity is absolutely benign because he's got video games. I mean, forget that he has all these great books and he's read them and all those things. I mean, that's just not that. I don't know what's going on. I hear this. I don't doubt this guy said this. He did say it. I hear this stuff from church people. And the kind of church people I hear it from, frankly, are the ones who are right because that's all that's going on in their particular church, or they've just been saying it for generations.
Most Southern Baptist churches are like most churches in America. They have 75 or fewer people and not a lot of pizza parties or self-help talks or whatever. They're getting leather-lunged, loudmouth preachers from the pulpit preaching the text the best they can exegete it, and that's fine.
But what brought him back to the fold?
They'll find the Stephen Furtick type churches. They'll find the mega churches and think that's what American Christianity is. And of course, I've never been to Stephen Furtick's church. I've heard a couple sermons. I've seen the scare memes about how awful he is and all that. And I don't make judgments until I know anything. I've heard most of his sermons are benign from the clips that I've heard of it. But I have no idea if they're doing like Sunday school or small groups where they're getting what books they're reading. I don't care. But to think that even, let's say it's as worse than the worst people say about it, that's not very many churches at all in this country.
Yeah.
So I don't I don't get this.
Well, the Honest Atheist says about the study that I just talked about. This just in: active participation in indoctrination decreases probability to doubt said indoctrination. Wow. Actually, that's not what the study found, Honest Atheist. And you're one of my favorite atheists that I interact with here. The study found that if someone remains in that indoctrination and stuffs their doubts away and has issues with other church members and doesn't have a close-knit group, they will slip away, even though they're in the indoctrination. What builds them up is if they actually get into a community that I think can answer these questions, but according to the study, that loves on them and surrounds them and that sort of thing. But the indoctrination itself isn't enough. See, here's the thing that I recently said. Did you know that the first video from our deal with Chip Bennett is now out, reaching the next generation? And one of the things that I said in that is true is that people, and you've jumped on board with this, and I've heard you say it, is people rarely make big worldview changes just for one reason.
Right.
It's never just the evidence, or rarely. It's rarely ever just because of a relationship. It's rarely, though sometimes it is, it's rarely ever just because they want to be like the culture, or just because they want to sin, or just because as a Christian they want the hope of heaven, or whatever. It's either way, either direction. It's rarely just one of those things. So yeah, for keeping people in the church, guess what? Indoctrination use. So yeah, for keeping people in the church, guess what? Okay, I think we may be back now. See if you're getting anything now. Am I back? All right. Well, we lost most of our audience, but we're going to press on despite that. Okay. We're back. We're back. Okay. Well, where were we? Were you droning on about something, Pritchett?
No, you were droning on about something.
What was I droning on about?
Indoctrination and stuff. Who cares?
Who cares?
It's Friday, and we just had our first live crash, right?
We had one before about a year ago during COVID, but I was engaging with the intellectual giants of the
theological world. Yeah.
Okay.
They're there. They were probably always there.
Yes, of course.
But I mean, yeah.
He says, I guess this is from him. I don't know who this is from. Well, he says, while I can take issue with, or she says, while I can take issue with his personal journey. Sorry, I'm still a little bit frazzled from this thing. I'm going to forget the past and move forward. While I can't take issue with his personal journey, there's much to criticize when it comes to Stefaniak's definition of deconstruction and his description of the ex-evangelical community. By deconstruction, he says, I mean the practice of re-examining previous beliefs and ultimately rejecting them. And by ex-evangelical, I mean those who have deconstructed from their previous ex-evangelical beliefs. He added that ex-evangelicals praise the glories of deconstruction. But those aren't fair descriptions of the process or those who step away from the church.
Actually, if you look on Twitter, that's exactly what it sounds like. So I'm with him on that.
Here's self-proclaimed hashtag ex-evangelical Daniel Griffin explaining why those definitions are wrong. Apparently, deconstruction is poison, a poison that J.L. Stefaniak narrowly avoided. I'm sure that evangelicals and authoritarian Christians see it as poisonous.
Okay, who are these
Shall we discuss thread?
Who are these authoritarian Christians?
Us, evangelicals. By using praise and glory, Jordan is directing his intended audience to see ex-evangelicals as the antithesis of his Christian audience who do their praise and glory from the pews. We've taken the poison, the one that he has the antidote to, of course.
I don't. Okay, first.
This thought kind of isn't over yet, so let me finish it because I want to get through this chunk. In other words, deconstruction, as Stefaniak uses it, only applies to those who have lost their faith and their way, their purpose, etc. Critically examining one's beliefs isn't enough for him. You have to ditch those beliefs too. But many Christians, many ex-evangelicals, would tell you they studied the Bible, they questioned their beliefs, and they still remain believers. They even engaged heavily in what Stefaniak calls the intellectual bulwark of the church. Now, here's the thing about this, and is it poison? Well, number one, yes, it's poison. Number two, progressives, if that bothers you, that what I'm saying progressive evangelicals are teaching is poison, 2, progressives call evangelical beliefs abusive, bigoted, hateful. They say that the theology itself is that way. So simmer down, you know. I've never used the words, but to refer to a twisting of Scripture, which every Orthodox Christian scholar on the face of this planet would consider at least some of the things that we saw in the discussion. I understand that progressive Christianity is not monolithic, but the whole point of the Sean McDowell Colby Martin interview was to show that there are some things that are kind of quintessential of progressive Christianity, and some of those things are at least what Colby held were heresies. That is, if you believe them, in what sense are you an Orthodox Christian at all? And some of them would say, fine, don't need to be, don't care, okay, but.
And no one's being authoritarian and making you believe anything. No one's making anyone go to church.
They're referring to that lick my boot leadership style of some like new independent fundamentalist churches, I guess. But that's not evangelicalism that we know.
15 years ago or whatever.
That would be one that I think they might consider.
Okay, and the Southern Baptist pastors that I know, and I know a gazillion of them, they
aren't that way.
They can't get the ladies in the church to stop bossing them around. You know, I don't know, and telling them what to preach. I don't know what planet these people are from.
Yeah, and the thing is it poison? Okay, I've never used that word to refer to what progressive Christians believe, but to the extent that they deny orthodoxy, and every Christian Orthodox scholar on the planet would say that they're twisting Scripture to support certain positions, yeah. I think poison is a perfectly fine synonym for that.
Right. Oh, imagine conservative, theologically conservative Orthodox Christians taking up for orthodoxy and calling heresy poison. Yeah. Awful. Don't be shocked. We'll say whatever you need us to say for your clips. It's fine. But here's the thing about the deconstruction thing. Okay, look, that's a I want a parade for me because I'm a new deconstructive evangelical. It's like, look at me, I deconstructed. They want it paraded. It's out there.
And I know that some people, it doesn't bother me that much. I mean, I don't like, look, I'm the kind of person, Pritchett knows this about me, and some of you may have picked up on this. I like to get along with people. I like to be liked. I like for everybody to be okay. That's why, given what I believe God has called me to, number one, I would have never picked this for myself. So number two, I don't like to tick people off. That's not what I'm looking for. But I want to make something clear here, that they're upset with him for saying that a deconstruction, in his mind, he's defining a deconstruction as walking away from evangelical Christianity. That's what ultimately counts as deconstruction. And when you say
I've deconstructed and I'm an ex-evangelical, that's exactly what you've done, is deconstructed your faith and walked away from evangelicalism.
Right, but he's saying that's deconstruction well, let's just go back to his definition. How did he define it? By deconstruction, I mean the practice of re-examining previous beliefs and ultimately rejecting them. And by evangelical, I mean those who have deconstructed from their previous evangelical beliefs.
And that's exactly right.
But what she wants to say is, hold up, you're acting like these people. But there's a lot of people who remain believers who deconstructed. Now, before you say that, because I know you're making a different point than the one that I want to make, both are good points. We did a show, I don't know, a couple of months ago, and I had mentioned that in my early 20s, I deconstructed my faith and put it back together. By the way, I've been saying that for 20 years, or I guess 15 since it happened. This new fad of calling it deconstruction, I was using that language years ago.
I wasn't. We just call it thinking.
Yes, and what I said was
thinking about stuff.
I took apart what I was taught to believe and put it back together to see what holds water, and some things were left out. That's literally deconstruction. And someone said, and I remained a believer, and someone said, this person, Mason Menenga, I don't know if they were referring to me. This was said on the same day that I said that I deconstructed and left young earth creationism and became an old earth creationist. So I don't know if he was responding to me or not. This happened on the same day, but he could have been responding to someone else completely different. But he says, going from young earth creationism to old earth creationism is not deconstruction. And here, I guess, a progressive Christian or maybe an atheist says, it definitely can be if it requires the way you've always approached the Bible and ditching the way you've always approached the Bible, adopting an entirely different hermeneutic. He says, but it shouldn't be the end goal. And she's like, OEC shouldn't be the end goal, sure, but I don't think most deconstruction processes have goals other than to discard false narratives. Right. So you guys need to figure out what deconstruction is so you can tell the rest of us.
Yeah, but like I said,
because you're mad at this guy for saying it's deconstruction.
Every Christian I know has deconstructed or reconstructed. These are fad words, okay? Every Christian I know has thought about their faith and asked questions about their faith and searched for answers about their faith. And the fact that they didn't leave their faith doesn't mean they didn't go through that process.
Yeah, and she's mad because this guy is saying you can't call it a deconstruction unless you walk away.
And you can find people on Twitter, like you just read, that'll be like, yep.
No, yeah. They'll say, yes, he's right and you're wrong.
Right, and then you'll find people who say, no, I agree with her.
Right.
And yeah, it's a mess.
So sort it out and let us know.
You know what's funny, though?
What?
Who can claim deconstruction? Okay, so between, I want to say, 1995 to 2015.
Yeah.
Okay. I remember every moderate and progressive, liberal, whatever, demanding that they be counted as evangelicals too.
Who?
Progressives, some more left of center moderates, liberal theologians, they all wanted to be called evangelicalism too. Until 2015, when the Republican primary was and Trump was in it, and then all of a sudden the evangelicals started flocking to Trump. And then in 2016, no one wanted to be called evangelicals anymore. And after 20 years of whining about not being included in the evangelical tent and saying we're evangelicals too, now, because of the political climate, now you see all this jumping ship from that. And it's just kind of funny that now they're going to have their own fight about who can be considered a deconstructical.
A deconstructionist?
A deconstructical.
A deconstructical. That sounds like the Decepticons, the Autobots,
right.
and the deconstructibles.
But that's what. But no. But it's this. They thank you for bringing your own cultural fights into your own little camp because it was so toxic before that I guess you missed it. Maybe I don't know because now they're having that same fight that evangelicals fought over. What's the difference?
Because you had the Autobots, the Decepticons, and you had
the Constructicons. The 6
green and purple guys that would turn into a giant robot. Yeah. So is this? It would be
who got taken down in Transformers the movie by those little cassettes that pop out of sound
on a space
rumble
play.
And
while Instruments of Destruction played,
right.
And then they threw Megatron out the window.
Yep.
And Starscream demanded that he was king. That's what started the whole.
That is. Thing. The only Transformers movie that exists.
But I am here. And I am so sorry that we are having these problems. It's really frustrating, but I think we're back. Okay, can everybody see me and hear me now? I'm assuming that you can. I'm doing this to make sure that I'm seeing it on the backup screen, and it looks. It looks like it is again. Okay, good. All right, we're back. Okay, we've lost Pritchett, but he'll be back in a minute. And thank you, Angel WVM, for saying I deconstructed and reconstructed so much stronger. Now I feel like I couldn't even call myself a Christian growing up. I used to be a follower of Christians. Now I'm a follower of Christ. Well, amen. Now, everyone, we're having trouble with internet here at Trinity because we're doing some major on-campus stuff. So I'm doing the best that I can. It may happen again. But we at least got to get through this article because Pritchett keeps saying this could be the single best episode of Trinity Radio that's ever happened.
Anytime we talk about the Transformers movie.
So we're having a little bit of tech problems, but we're back. We're going to get through this. Rebekah Kohlhepp continues in the article that we were reading. Let's see where we left off. It's possible to critically examine Christian views, especially conservative interpretations of it, and come out a more progressive Christian on the other side. That shouldn't make you a bad Christian, but that's certainly implied by Stefaniak. Okay. Now, I have thoughts on this, ready to go, Pritchett. I'm sure you're working on your own thoughts on this. But shouldn't make you a bad Christian. Well, one, you're right. You're right. Because people that accept the things that we learned were, at least some of the things that Colby speaks of as though they are things you can expect to find in progressive Christianity, like if they deny the bodily resurrection, if they deny that God is personal, if they deny that there is a God, if they think of God as some impersonal force, these kind of things. People that accept those things are rejecting Christian teaching, and that's not Christianity.
Right. So it's not that you're a bad
So
Christian
they aren't
at
bad
all.
Christians.
They're just not Christians.
They're not Christians. Now, if they are still Christians, and if Christian, and they just, maybe they've just gotten into this, they haven't thought through these things too much, but they are still technically Christians. At minimum, what it means to be a Christian is to believe what Jesus believed. Mm-hmm. And this means they're terrible Christians if they actually are Christians, because they're not believing what Jesus believed. I think that's important to mention. Pritchett, you have anything on that?
No, I was just going to say the same thing. You're right. They're not bad Christians because I don't consider them to be Christians. Christianity has a definition. It has a set of fundamental beliefs. There's that dirty word, fundamental. But it has a set of what we call paleo-orthodox. There's a minimum. But if you're like no to the Apostles' Creed, well, why bother? Why bother?
So,
and I know there's actually atheists out there that agree with this. They would also agree. What are you doing?
Yeah, that's why I keep saying to progressive Christians, many of the atheists I know would be like, well, then why are you bothering with it?
Yeah, why?
Because you kind of don't, you're kind of saying a lot of that stuff isn't real.
Yeah.
You know, all right. In other words, let's see.
No, further down.
I'm further down. Where am I at here?
I'm an ex-Lutheran.
I'm an ex-Lutheran atheist myself. I spent years searching for a loving... Okay, you're an ex-Lutheran in the sense that you were raised Lutheran. But as you say, you never believed in God.
Yeah.
And to be Lutheran, I think you have to believe in God.
No, you could be a member of a Lutheran congregation.
You could be a member of the congregation, right? Okay. Well, I don't know. I don't know what their statement of faith is at the Missouri Synod. I spent years searching for a loving community of former Christians online, and it's those same progressive Christian ex-evangelicals who gave me a space where I feel most at home. Mm-hmm. Those ex-evangelicals oppose purity culture,
See,
misogyny,
that's always number one at the top of the list.
or LGBT stuff.
Yeah, purity culture,
Something to do with sexuality.
Right.
Misogyny within the church, homophobia, and abusive theology.
Okay, misogyny in the church. Okay, again,
which could mean they're just complementarian.
if the average Southern Baptist church has fewer than 75 people, the average Lutheran Missouri Synod church has fewer than 40 people, 30 of which are women. I'm sorry. Misogyny, I wouldn't think is rampant in all of these tiny, dying Lutheran churches all across the country.
Their progressive Christianity, she says, and my humanist values.
What is abusive theology and homophobia? Homophobia has been defined as, I think traditional Christianity is right and that homosexuality is a sin. That's now being defined. That's not homophobia. That's basic Christian teaching. Labeling it homophobia demonstrates just complete ignorance. Nobody is phobic towards gay people. Who do you know, Braxton, that is actually phobic, scared of gay people?
Well, that's morphologically not what it means anymore, like you're saying.
Right. So, but words mean things. Okay. How many gay bashers do you know are in
None.
Lutheran churches?
I don't know any gay bashers at all.
Yeah. Okay. So, because they think that a certain sexual preference is sinful, that doesn't make them homophobes. It makes them believing what Christianity has taught for 2,000 years. Period. Abusive theology, I guess there can be some abusive theology.
What Colby said was abusive, I think, and I don't mean to misquote you, Colby. I would think many of them would say stuff about sexuality, right? But also the complementarianism.
Okay, all right. Purity is a good ancient word that that means, we're to be presented pure, and
clean
holy
before God,
right?
clean,
Now,
righteous.
There are two valid criticisms, and then the rest is whining. Two valid criticisms of purity culture, and those are, one, an overemphasis and value placed on virginity as opposed to chastity. That's a valid critique, okay? And two, it was probably too much preached in youth groups and not enough preached to single adults in the congregation that probably had way more sex outside of marriage than the youth were having. Okay? Those are the only two valid critiques. The rest of it just sounds like whining to me that, oh, I feel bad because I was sexually active and this purity culture demeaned me. Well, no, it's just that they were preaching biblical standards. But other than the overemphasizing and value placed on virginity as opposed to chastity, which is what the Bible is on about more than it is about virginity, and not drilling that into the adult congregations as much as you did the youth, I don't know. I don't get the rap, other than probably people felt conviction about sexual promiscuity and purity culture made them feel bad. But if they were Christians, that's called the conviction of the Holy Spirit. So I had that.
2 Corinthians chapter 7, it is a godly sorrow not to be repented of, but works repentance.
Yeah. So I did not wait till I was married. You waited till you were married, right? Mm-hmm. But the standard, the biblical standard, is chastity. So the fact that I was convicted of my sin is not abuse. It's not devaluing. It's that when I was having sex outside of being married, that's just sin, and you shouldn't do it because the Bible is against that. And saying that out loud in a church is just like saying, don't kill people, don't commit adultery, don't lie, don't steal. It's all, there's not a difference there. They're just preaching historic Christian teachings on sexuality and morality in general. So saying don't have sex outside of marriage is no different than saying don't murder people.
Yes.
They're just biblical commands.
One thing that is actually an interesting fact about the fact that we're here in the 21st century. We've got a culture in the West, in 21st century Western life. It's not the same culture that existed in any other culture. It's not the same culture that existed in ancient Rome. It's not the same culture that there are things that you could point out, similarities, blah, blah, blah. But we're doing basically right now today, this is not new. See, I think the progressives are speaking as though this is new. It's not new. Every culture has things in it that rub against what the Bible teaches, that don't sit well with what the Bible teaches. And there are people in all those cultures who try to then tweak the Bible or look at the Bible in a way that allows for whatever they're doing in their culture if they want to remain a Christian culture. That's what's going on here. But she says about progressive Christians. Now, this is an atheist talking. She says their progressive Christianity and my humanist values overlap a lot in the most important places, in my opinion.
Right. I agree with you, and that's why we say they're not Christians.
That's the problem. Do you want to know why it is that that of course your humanist values and progressive Christian values overlap? They both reflect the same non-Christian secular culture. Mm-hmm. That's what's going on. You're both saying yes to what the cultural Western thinking in general is. And you might say, well, of course, we are the most advanced society in history. Okay, we are technologically the most advanced society in history, but when it comes to moral issues, there are always things in culture that you hold that you think are perfectly fine that would have seemed barbaric to people in other cultures. Like the slaughtering of children in what should be the safest place for them, their mother's womb. Yeah, that would have seemed pretty darn barbaric to a lot of cultures in history. The homosexual thing, all the views on sexuality would have seemed wrong to some people throughout history. And in 100 years from now, guess what? Even though you're calling yourself progressive, you're thinking of yourself, even as an atheist, as a part of this progressive movement where you found comfort and all those things. You think I'm on the cutting edge of what's right and what's moral and what's good. Interestingly, many people have a completely different view on morality that doesn't allow for it, but still, you're on the cutting edge of morality, progressing toward a standard that does not exist. And yet, when I'm looking at all of that, and I'm listening to that, I'm thinking in 100 years' time, there's stuff you hold right now that will seem so bigoted to people in your culture in 100 years' time. Oh, that won't happen to me. It happens to everyone. It happens to everyone because these cultures change.
Yep.
And what they understand to be moral change.
And C.S. Lewis was right. Chronological snobbery is a thing.
Yeah, that's what's happening.
And it's actually the chronological snobbery is from people in your camp. And 100 years from now, your camp is going to say that about you too.
Yes. And do you want to know why she thinks these overlap in some of the best parts? The first thing she says after that is, those Christians, the ones she likes, have never tried to convert me. Okay, if they've never tried to convert you, then they are bad Christians or not Christians.
Yeah, because Jesus said,
Because, none less than Jesus, who everybody claims to like here, well, at least the progressives do, he sent them out on the Great Commission.
Yeah.
So not doing the very thing God commanded you. They're not doing for you the very thing God commanded them to do. And if they believe what Jesus said there, if they believe all this stuff, they know that that's actually not loving.
The one thing he said before he took off.
And
the one thing he said before he left to go ascend into heaven was, go tell the world about me and all these things that I've said and teach them to obey everything.
Yes, teach them to obey it all.
Stuff in Matthew 19,
and baptize them,
including all that stuff I said about hell. What I said about one man and one woman. This is back in chapter 19. All that stuff. Go tell everyone about that.
And even if you want to take a view of hell that's like that Jesus was just talking about, that valley over there, the Valley of Hinnom. He wasn't talking about afterlife hell and all that. Okay, well, you're not going to find too many progressives that think that sounds nice either. Yeah. So, but now she says, they didn't try to convert me or belittle me for being an atheist. Well, I wouldn't belittle you for being an atheist, but you might presume that I'm belittling you for being an atheist.
If you challenge the idea.
If I challenge atheism, yeah.
But that's not.
But if that's true, aren't you belittling the thoughts of those who agree with you?
Well, yeah, that's all she's been doing is complaining and talking about how awful those Christians are.
Well, not Christians, evangelicals.
Oh yeah, evangelicals.
She says it's a non-judgmental acceptance I haven't found it anywhere else. You found it among some atheists, I'm sure. And the reason you're finding it among progressives is, again, because...
No, don't let them have that. Atheists,
it towards...
Atheists, why are you so rotten to her? She says she's only found it from progressive... atheist community is so toxic. It's got such abusive atheology that even some atheists can't tolerate being around other atheists.
Well,
take that, atheist. Well, if we're going to talk about how abusive evangelicalism is, and
I do believe if you accept progressive Christianity, there's a lot of harm that comes from that, and I think if you reject Christianity, there's a great deal of harm that's going to happen to our culture.
Atheists
harm for you personally.
Atheists are judgmental hypocrites. They're such judgmental. They judge us every live stream that we have. It's Braxton's a liar, a fraud, a used car salesman, on and on and on and on and on. So much mental. Atheists is hypocrites too.
Remember that we have atheist patrons, so they're not all that way.
No, I'm just using the same slap a broad brush on everything that they do. Our atheist patrons, they know what I'm doing. They're on the up and up.
That's why it was even more shocking, she says, to see this follow-up tweet by Stefaniak responding to criticism of his article. He said in a tweet, I was QT'd by someone not so pleased with my deconstruction article earlier today. Seems quite a few that have left Christianity pleased with it. No surprise. It's had me thinking. Based on what I've seen, if I truly became an ex-evangelical or whatever and left the faith completely, one of the last places I would go is the online ex-evangelical community. I'd be in search of real grace, mercy, hope, love, and I am confident I wouldn't find it there. But she says, so the online community of former evangelicals is incapable of real grace, mercy, hope, and love? That's not what I or other ex-evangelical believers have found in practice. The community has been inviting and uplifting more so than I ever experienced in the traditional church. Curious to learn more about them, consider following these accounts, and there's a link to accounts. Now, I don't doubt that certain people in the progressive community, if you're an ex-evangelical, some of them can be pretty toxic toward people who are not ex-evangelical. Yeah. But if you are ex-evangelical, I can see them being very uplifting and all those kind of things. Is that loving? Is that gracious? I get that it feels that way. But if the Jesus in the Bible is real, if Christianity is true, that is the least loving thing they could do for you, is basically not try to convert you and treat you as though what you're believing is fine. Don't worry about it. That's not loving. Nope. If it's true. And I know it's not fun, or it doesn't feel good, or it makes you upset or angry at me or triggered, especially things Pritchett said a moment ago. And but here's the thing.
Here's the hope.
If
there's no hope,
if Christianity is true, then what we're doing right now is loving. And I would think you would agree with the proposition,
intellectually, not emotionally.
Intellectually, that if Christianity is true, as Christians like me think it is, then when we try to convert you, we're doing something we consider to be loving. That's loving if Christianity is true. Yeah, that's loving.
Atheist Penn Jillette agrees with you.
Yeah, with me.
Yeah,
yes.
With you.
So, but this is what I really wanted to get to. This is everything else leading up to this has been lead up.
We have another hour.
No, this can be said.
I'm going to conclude with the main thing in 5 minutes. What we spent.
Well, it's easy to say everything we've just said about this last point when she says that the progressive Christianity doesn't rub up against her humanism in any way. Yeah, basically, you might as well be saying when Christians quit teaching Christian stuff, we get along fine. Duh. I mean, I could have said that. But for many people, the vitriol coming from the atheist side is not directed toward Christian theists because they believe in God. It's not directed for many people, not all of them. Not all of them.
There's particularly a quick caveat in everything.
Because I'm going to be specific with my language, and I want to be specific on this.
Makes it cumbersome.
The atheists who are interested in the evidential side of things, the atheists who are studying philosophy of religion, or just the atheists who are just more sensible about these things. These people they don't necessarily fall into this, but many do. For many people, the vitriol coming from the atheist side is not directed toward Christian theists because they're God. It's directed toward believers because of political differences. As we see, internet atheism has no problem with people who affirm some kind of Christianity, so long as they vote the same as them. Mm-hmm. They have no problem with polytheists and pagans. Now, polytheists and pagans online, there are some, and they will tell you, no, some of the atheists give me a hard time. Right, because what I'm saying isn't about all of them. But for the most part, they have no problem with polytheists and pagans so long as they vote the same as them. There are exceptions to that, but overwhelmingly, I think that's true. What we really have going on here is a culture war, not so much just, well, I just don't think that there's a God, or I don't think that Christianity technically is true. And so I'm just kind of, bringing some considerations for you to get. No, I think there's a lot of this, it's about politics. Now, for the atheists that are screaming at the computer right now, no, atheism isn't anything like that. Atheism is just not believing in God. Well, according to a Pew Research survey, 69% of atheists are Democrats. Is that a big surprise? Or how about this? Abortion should be legal in all cases. 87% of atheists say that in America. 87%. Abortion should be legal in all or most cases. By the way, that's 87%. There were several more that believe it should be legal, just not necessarily in all cases. Strongly favor same-sex marriage. Do you think that atheists overwhelmingly affirm same-sex marriage, or no? You think they're against that? Are you having a hard time deciding? No, you're not. You know that a lot of them do. 92% strongly favor same-sex marriage. Actually, 1% less than that affirms evolution. 91%.
9% of atheists don't affirm evolution.
According to the Pew survey.
8% don't favor same-sex.
Now, there's some problems with that because you know how just like before when we've looked at studies, they'll sometimes be like, this percentage of atheists believe in God. And it's like, That's not atheism, right? Well, similarly here, when you look at some of the other options like with evolution, that God started evolution. Well, that's not an atheist then. You're supposed to be polling atheists. This is a poll about atheists. And you can look that up. I didn't put that poll in here. But the point is 69% Democrat, 87% abortion, 92% same-sex marriage, 91% affirm evolution. There are some, now it doesn't, obviously with each of these, there are atheists who are not in those categories. And in that sense, atheism is not monolithic. But in general, the atheist activists that are out there, I think you're going to see largely this. Yeah. Now, you do get like a scholar fiction who doesn't affirm the abortion thing like it's worded here. I'm granting that, and on each of these things. But in general, I think this is what these activists are really bothered by. That's why they're not doing big takedowns of like polytheists and pagans and stuff as much as they are everything else. I can't even think of a video right now where they are, and sometimes they'll teach those people, and they don't have a problem with progressive Christians. The problem they have is with the people like us.
Some atheists have a problem with progressive Christians.
Some
intellectually.
Do. Yes, intellectually,
not politically.
But the thing that keeps them doing what they're doing overwhelmingly is those daggum young Earth creationists want this taught in the classroom. Those people want to stop women. They want to control women's bodies. They want to tell the gays what to do, right? That's what they think that's what they've got real problems with. And they know that underlying that is the theism or the Christianity. And so of course they're going to attack that. And some of them will do as much, I think. All right. I'm on the cusp of naming people that I think would agree.
Shermer.
But I'm not going to do it.
Shermer gave that rant at the beginning of a debate where he was it at Willow Creek or whatever, where he prattled off a list of stuff like this, and of course about atheists in general and how persecuted they are and blah, 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 blah.
So what that leads me to...
Christians aren't the only people with persecution complexes that are phony here in America. We've talked about that before, but atheists have a persecution complex when they line up with the culture on almost everything but atheism. Give me a break.
So, I mean, if I'm wrong, I should start seeing some videos taking down progressive Christians, polytheists, pagans, people like that. But I'm not seeing that as much. And I take it to be because predominantly that's what they see as harmful, is what the Christian evangelicals are bringing. So there you go. That's our deconstruction of this article about deconstruction.
Yeah. So apparently they need to figure out what that means and who's allowed to use the label, just like what happened when they were all evangelicals and wanting to use the label until it became a political no to have that label, and then all of a sudden they come up with other words. Okay, so sounds like the same kind of nonsense that you didn't like about evangelicalism showing up in your own thing. I wonder what's next that's going to make that as toxic a community as they considered evangelicalism to be, because it'll happen, because there's a toxic, everyone's favorite word. I think it's silly, but
I don't think the atheists will find that with progressive Christianity, because I think the progressive Christians are going to keep believing in terms of cultural stuff.
No, but I'm talking about all this loving and acceptance stuff until one progressive Christian starts fighting with another. Just like you see the atheists go at it on Twitter over every little thing. And then the whole Richard Dawkins thing is a good example.
That is another, okay. Yeah. This individual, I think, who wrote this article, has an article on her blog about that Richard Dawkins fiasco.
Yeah.
And, I mean, as another example of where I think it's political. I mean, he's their big guy, right?
Yeah.
And yet they're throwing him out, many of them, because of this issue.
And others are defending him. And then all of a sudden the community gets toxic because people don't agree. And
here's our article.
Whenever someone disagrees with anyone else, that person is just being toxic. That's because our culture is a bunch of sissies.
Real quick, she says about the Dawkins problem. This is from April 25th of this year. One could argue that the atheist community has an unspoken rule to respect the esteemed biologist and controversialist Richard Dawkins. Yes, I agree. People have several reasons to respect the man. He has advocated for atheism. He has communicated the science of evolution to the masses. He has written many beloved books. Hell, I'm just reading her here. The man invented the word meme. For many of us, there has been a lot to like about Dawkins, but a line must be drawn somewhere. And this is where I think, again, we see it's about politics.
Yeah.
There was the whole thing a couple of years ago when Rationality Rules did the thing and then had to, I think he apologized later. If not, I'm sorry. But he did this whole thing about trans women competing in sports with the other women, with women, and how that could actually hurt athletics and all that. And I realize that's supposed to be a big transphobic thing to say, but he said it. And that he was concerned about that, and the atheist world fell all over itself.
Yeah.
Because what do we do? Because I think that what we saw there was the truth of the hypothesis I'm putting forward, that Rationality Rules, Stephen Woodford, is what I consider to be an evidentialist atheist. He is actually wanting to talk about the evidence. And so when he says something that's not politically cool with other atheists, well, they eat him alive. I mean, that's what basically happens.
Because the community's toxic too.
Well, I didn't say that. I'm just saying that
I'm going to say it because everyone keeps saying Christianity's toxic or evangelicalism is toxic and it's abusive. You can find that in any group. That's my only point. You can find that in any group. But if they're going to keep saying it about Christianity, I'm just going to keep blanket saying it about every other community. And you can find examples.
And with that, see you next time on Trinity Radio.